Well, hello, everybody. Here you are at Season 1, Episode 10 of Bridging Generations with Howard Snooks. And I have a guest I know pretty well over the last 9 years. His name is Jeff Warnock, not Jeff Warlock. It's Jeff Warnock. And I'm going to hand it over to Jeff here and have him tell you a little bit about himself. I always start with a dad joke. So, it used to be taboo to talk about plastic surgery at all. But now you mention Botox and nobody raises an eyebrow. But Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jeff. Hey, I just want to introduce you to the people out there. You've been around here for a while, and you can just start where you'd like, but I'll ask you some questions along the way.
Okay. Well, I'm stoked to be here with you, Howard. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. We obviously have had a fantastic evolving friendship and relationship and professional collaboration, journey over the past 9 years, doing a lot of media related stuff. And so I guess that's a pretty good place to start. Is I am a professional multimedia producer, specifically more for the branding side of things. Do a lot of commercial video production, and then photography, graphic design, podcast production, and that all kind of came about through music production. It's always been my first love. Yep. And when I was living in Boston, where I went to school for a while, I'd started a recording studio and just kind of found a love for the technical production side of the creative process. It's always tickled my my nerd fancy, and also allowed me to kind of be creative in the process. And so it's been in a really interesting way of combining some of my creative endeavors with my background in marketing and business, and sort of combine it all in a way that helps people get their message out and tell their story in a way that's authentic and theoretically well received by their audience. So,
well, Jeff has been my go-to guy for several things. And I was trying to remember, how did I actually get in touch with you? It was online, but I can't remember how was it that
it was through Instagram, if I recall, which it's actually a really funny story, because at the time I was growing my page through this was back in the Wild West of Instagram, through some kind of techie automated ways of getting my page out there in front of people. And I had, you're basically the only person who reached out in a way that was like really authentic or productive. I had been approached by, stupid little brands and, kind of influencer type of thing.
Sure.
But that wasn't my objective with the process. And so when I saw your message through there, I kind of immediately almost just thought, oh, it's just one of these spam things. And then I read it again, and it's like, oh, this dude's here and in Boulder, and we got together, and again, I'm so blessed that it worked out that way, because you've become such a close friend, and we always have a great time when we get together.
We have a great time. Well, I should give a little backstory here. I was a therapist for 45 years. Some of you know this already, but not everybody. And then a lot of things happened in the year 2015, and I just kind of reinvented myself. And through just this sort of process, I decided I was going to become a model and a commercial actor. And so I was getting my act together. And so when you do those things, you need a photographer. So I hired him to be, I guess it wasn't my very first photo shoot, but the first photo shoot that I sort of directed. I was the guy who chose the photographer and stuff. So I chose Jeff for that. And he did a great job on that photo shoot. And then along with that, he helped me. I got this crazy idea in 2018 that I would put together a calendar of Men of Boulder. And so Jeff did all the photography for the calendar. It didn't sell well, but it's still around as a classic. I know where some copies are, and people, so pretty soon, the year's going to come around and I'll be able to use it again. So
you hear that, people? Buy your retro 2021 vintage Men of Boulder calendar.
2018.
What?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That was
2018.
Yeah, you're right. Wow.
Yeah. And then he also, I think that he did a primo job on this. I was able to walk in Denver Fashion Week in 2017. And so I hired Jeff to come and put together a film of that. And when I looked at it just recently, I thought, God, that guy did a great job of that. So anyway, I'm a big promoter of Jeff and his skills.
Well, I appreciate that. And you are to thank for my modeling career, illustrious,
Right.
short-lived international hair model career.
Right.
Just the quick overview of that was, I was always very happy behind the camera, and eventually you just implanted the seed in my head enough. He's like, you should reach out to our person at the time.
Right.
And ended up working out for a while. I met some good people through that and had some great experiences. And there's a fantastic photo of us at a DFW, maybe probably a couple of years after the video.
Yep.
With my big afro year.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a fun time.
So anyway, we've got some history together. And so when I started putting together my guest list of people I wanted to interview, Jeff was really way up there on the list. So I'm happy he's here.
I'm happy to be here.
So the theme of this is, how do you bridge generations? How do you have authentic relationships with people of different generations? And we're kind of like a prime example of that. You're just at the age that, well, I have children. They're a little bit older than you are, actually, but you definitely could be one of my kids. So there's a generations for. And what do you think? Was it hard to, interact?
When you first told me about the show that we're on right now and the idea of it, I was just really excited by the concept, because I think it's a topic that it's hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around, and especially in light of call it recent headlines. But when people think of relationships between younger people and older people, sometimes there's the wrong connotation can be there, but it's the to me it's the core of what can help a person grow in a way that's so much greater and more efficient than what they could do in, let's call it, a traditional sense. When the traditional path for people, if they just follow the instruction book laid out in front of them, is, you kind of you grow up, you have your parents, maybe you have an older sibling, you go through the school system, you come out, you get, maybe you have an internship, and then you're kind of in the corporate world or whatever. And it's sort of just this very cookie cutter formulaic approach. And I think most people are more or less happy doing that because they don't necessarily know there's another way. For me, I have always found that I've had way more success and genuine, mutually beneficial relationships as I've taken the initiative to reach out to different people I've come across in my life. To sort of just ask them for advice or help or something. And more often than not, these people have been not only honored, but so enthusiastic about kind of sharing their story. And I'm intentionally being a little ambiguous here to start, but it's sort of a core of why I think what makes me good at my job is storytelling and being able to communicate a complex idea in a way that people can digest. And typically that's through narrative. People understand, stories, so they enjoy them. We watch film, we read books, we do all this stuff. So to me, while traditional learning happens in a classroom, real authentic learning happens in conversation and by doing. And you are very rarely just given opportunities to do that unless you seek them out. And so at a young age, I'll start here. Obviously my parents are fantastic and they taught me a lot about life, and, but we have a great relationship.
You grew up in New Jersey.
I did grow up in New Jersey, right outside of New York City. And I have two younger brothers, so I never had an older brother. but I was always drawn towards older friends, older male friends. I felt like I had a difficult time connecting with other males my own age for a while. And you know, I was kind of like, I changed schools and stuff, and it was just I felt like maybe there was sort of a beyond my years thing where I just like wasn't, my brain was somewhere that my like age wasn't. And all that to say, like I was always able to have these bigger conversations with people that were older than myself, the conversations that I wanted to have. And you know, maybe it's just because I sucked at video games and wasn't that athletic. So I didn't have a ton of like mutual interest with the kids my own age, your traditional like school yard friends. So my mom's brother, Uncle Jim, shout out Uncle Jim, he was very formative to me developing some of these non-traditional hobbies, interests, ways of thinking. You know, he was always there with the right album or the right book at the right time when I was growing up. Whether
he was reading you correctly then, like where you were.
He was, and to his credit, he wasn't ever forcing it on me. He was responding to sort of the cues that I would give him, and it was, you know, okay, here's like the right Pink Floyd album for you, or here's this really, you know, here's kind of like an introduction to sort of like Eastern philosophy disguised as a novel, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Brown. Fantastic book if anyone hasn't read it. And so there were some of these nuggets that I was able at an early age to kind of get from him that helped me identify an alternative path to what was laid out by my parents, who were both very successful and wanted nothing but the best for me. But there was something about that path that felt unfulfilling to me. And maybe, so I went to Northeastern in Boston. A big part of that college career at that school is the co-op program. So instead of a traditional 4-year education, it's a 5-year program. And after your freshman year, you do 6 months in school, 6 months in sort of a, you know, corporate environment for me. I was in the business school at the time. And so I had some good, they're essentially 6-month-long internships where you show up 9 to 5, you work your 40 hours a week, you make a little bit of money, whatever. And the way Northeastern describes it is like you almost learn what you don't want to do, not what you want to do.
Oh, that's interesting.
I did for sure. I realized like, hey, if I have to show up in this office fluorescent light thing for the rest of my life, it's not, I don't think this is going to work for me in my like overall happiness, you know, wellness, all that stuff. So at that point, it kind of gave me the kick in the pants to start identifying other ways of establishing a career where I could still achieve that level of success that, you know, my parents wanted me to have and that, you know, I wanted for myself and all that. But like, okay, what are my other options? And so I started seeking out people in the Boston area, some certain professors, and just sort of seeing what opportunities they, you know, might exist in the world for me. That's how I started developing some of my film production and photography skill sets. It's how I sort of identified this alternative path because, you know, growing up, if you wanted to be in the creative industry, you know, when I was young, I always had, you know, my parents' old video camera, making stupid videos with my brothers and stuff. Like I loved that, but I knew that, hey, I'm not really in the Hollywood mindset. I have no interest in doing that path.
Well, I got a question.
Yeah, please.
It seems like when I was hearing you talk about your Uncle Jim and stuff, there's kind of a spiritual component to that.
There sure is.
And there's different words to use for that path, but that was sort of caught my idea. That's what you were kind of needing, was some sort of spiritual direction or some, you know, deeper kind of meaning to your life than what you know, you're left feeling unsatisfied until this started happening. And Northeastern helped you.
Yeah. It's very astute of you to kind of pin down that topic, because I think I undersold how critical that was at the time. I was kind of those feelings I had of not fitting in with the people my own age it was tough for me. That
is painful as can be if you don't fit in with people your age range, with your peers.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
And it was a pretty serious phase of darkness for me. It was I was in a really bad place mentally and emotionally.
Wow.
And just kind of the classic depression symptoms, just like sleeping a lot and not just like what's the point.
Wow. So did Jim your Uncle Jim, did he sort of pick that up? He thought,
I think it was obvious for everybody in my family.
Gotcha.
And they loved me just the same, and they did everything they could to help me and meet me where I was at. But that generation, and I'm sure you could speak more to this, is like it wasn't really part of the conversation until the past 20-ish years, 30 years, like depression, therapy, all that stuff. Like it was more of a like, oh, you have problems, like why are you and maybe there's a cultural component too of that sort of East Coast hustle mindset of like we there's no time to talk about that shit. It's just figure it out and go. And I think that's awful. But I think it's it's just the vocabulary wasn't really there when I was going through it for my parents, and so they did whatever they could with finding people for me to talk to, and I'm sure as a professional in that world, it's like you don't necessarily like relate to the first person you talk to, and it's, if you don't know any better, you don't know that there are tons of other personalities out there that might be able to actually help you and meet you where you're at better. Anyway, so without getting too deep into that, I found the most enlightening stuff in books and music and all of that, and it wasn't like an overnight shift. It was, you just start like, there became an interest and an intrigue, a light, a fire sort of to it at once you start reading and listening and like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not totally isolated and alone in this feeling. There are clearly other people who have felt this and beaten it, more importantly.
Well, the door got open for you.
It did.
And you brought out this thing that I think is worthwhile in terms of generations. You're right. When I decided to become a shrink, it was like people were going, what are you doing? But there was a world there, when I went to graduate school and stuff, I found all these other people that were interested in that the same way I was. But you're right, it's a much smaller cohort of people. And so that's the big difference. I think people from my generation weren't as likely to go see a therapist as they are nowadays. Therapists, they have waiting lists. It takes forever to get in to see a therapist, and everybody talks about being a therapist.
Yeah.
And it used to be kind of like, well, I got to be gone here for an hour. And where are you going? Well, I got to go see a man about a dog, something like that. And so it's very different now.
Yeah. And it's almost even flipped. It's like overcorrected where if you're not in therapy, something's wrong with you.
No, that's a good observation.
And I think I'm sure someone else has said it, I can't remember who, but like, the therapy culture has problems in and of itself, because to me, a proper therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, they give you the tools you need to help yourself. There's nothing another person can do to fix you. And I think there's a self-licking ice cream cone to the therapy industry where, and all these telehealth stuff, it seems to be a loop that a lot of people get trapped in, because it's easier to just do that than do like the really hard work and try to lift yourself out of it. It's almost impossible to really verbalize, but the right therapist at the right time can change someone's life, and did for me. It took me 5 therapists before I met someone. Dr. Kelly was her name, and she was a younger person we finally found, because the first one they took me to was like the best psychoanalyst they could find. We drove into New York City. It was this old, classic Jewish, psychiatrist, doctor.
Brownstone office.
Beautiful office.
Yep.
And, it was
I knew those sorts of people.
Yep. Yeah. And it didn't, I knew I never wanted to go back there. And not only just because of like the commute was a nightmare and all that stuff, but like, then there was just like, okay, let's just, offer some tender loving medication. That didn't last long. Those pills got flushed pretty quick because it's like, oh, this is not the fix I wanted. And you hop around and you finally find someone who feels like they actually are listening to you and understand, not even if the other people were listening, they didn't hear me, and those are different things, they're writing something down. But that's probably one of those other really important initial cross-generational interactions I had was someone who's willing to like hear me out, listen to all my bullshit, and just like, and it wasn't too silly or whatever. Like there was nothing that was off the table, which was a really refreshing thing, because I hadn't had an opportunity just to talk about dating or whatever, or anything, like with somebody who felt like they could meet me closer to where I was.
Well, it sounds like Dr. Kelly had respect for you.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal, I think. And the psychoanalysts, I don't think they think those psychoanalysts didn't think in terms of respect for the patient or the client. They expected a lot of respect from the patient to the analyst, but it was sort of I thought it was a weird dynamic. And some people really did great. I still think theoretically psychoanalysis has a tremendous amount to offer. And it's, I wanted to ask you about, did people try to give you advice? Would the therapist try to give you advice?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. I mean, I'm sure there was an element of that. And even if there was, and this may be the reason I have a non-traditional life, is that I don't love being told what to do.
Well, see, I think you're not alone in that. That's been my experience when I work with my clients, that every once in a while, I do think I better give this person some advice because they are really clueless. But for the most part, advice just falls flat. And it's kind of presumptuous, I think, on the part of a therapist to think, well, if I were in your place, this is what I would do, because it doesn't transfer over to another person necessarily.
I think it's the right advice at the wrong time is still the wrong advice.
Yeah.
And sometimes the person who's in a dark place doesn't have the capability of hearing it or internalizing it. And that's, and then there's like sort of the frustration element. It's like, of course I know that. Like, what do you think?
Right.
And, for someone who's on that sort of like negative downslide where, maybe they're prone to sort of like addictive tendencies or, self-harming tendencies or whatever. Like it's like, yeah, no duh. It's almost more frustrating and more harmful to give someone sort of like that, like storefront advice.
It's dismissive.
It's dismissive. Yes. Yeah. But yes. And so I think my original point, where it's like, all they can do is sort of give you a set of tools that you can sort of pick and choose which ones seem to work well in, where you're at in your life. And for me at that time, it was a lot of the Eastern practices started becoming very important for me. And, the meditation and obviously like the overall, like the physical health component, because as better than anyone else, like you're incredibly fit. Like there's that natural endorphin, serotonin release of exercise and eating well. And it's like, there are certain parts of the formula that are pretty cut and dry. It's like, if you remove some of all this processed shit and you start, getting a better sleep schedule and you move your body, and like, then you start creating a cleaner workspace for your brain. And for me, I find that's just very critical at, the practice, the literal and figurative sense of like
cleaner workspace.
Yeah. Because
I like that image.
Once you start removing the clutter, the noise, and there's a line from that book I referenced earlier, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, where it's the, just taking out the trash and getting all of that crap out of, the place you need to operate. And then all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to start sorting through the noise in there. And it's like, okay, well, this is some subconscious thing that okay, like we can put that aside for now. And like, here's something that I do feel like there's something exciting here for me.
Well, you know what? I
Yeah,
don't mean,
please.
what it sounds like to me is you developed some insight about how your mind was working, which was able to help you to discard that. That's what seems to me that insight is one of the heroes here in this journey you're describing.
I think it's a really interesting analogy, because it seems to be how I've developed a lot of my professional interest as well. Like I didn't study video production. I didn't study photography. I just learned all of that stuff, what I'll call YouTube University, and getting in there and sort of figuring it out. Like there's the opening the hood and just start playing with things, and you break some shit along the way for sure.
Yep.
And you have to learn the hard way. And there's probably a way more efficient way of doing things. But for some people like myself, like there's no other effective way of learning something than just to try tweaking with it.
Yeah, and you're courageous about it. Like I just recently, I'll confess, I'm not very technologically adept, and so I've relied on Jeff a lot to help me. Thank heavens. And so he just recently helped resolve an issue I had with my laptop. That it wasn't like it's some horrible, terrible problem, but I didn't know how to approach it, and he knew exactly what to do, and it took him 20 minutes, and I have a working laptop again.
Well, it's a great example, because there's a really interesting parallel here where it's kind of like, and I'll reference another really important book to my evolution. It was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, that's one of mine too.
It was phenomenal. And I'm glad I read that after Way of the Peaceful Warrior, but it's also one of those, I guess, quasi novels that there's a lot of Eastern gem of wisdom buried in there that you kind of have to, it's not just like a textbook. You have to kind of extract it as you go. But I call it Zen and the Art of Troubleshooting, because there's something really poetic about identifying a problem and having no other information in front of you other than like, hey, this thing isn't working. Let me approach this with a specific process and identify where the problem is and then how to fix it. And there's sort of a, in the technical world, there's a, there are certain best practices for that. And you start at the source, it seems like the microphone's working. Okay, maybe it's the cable, then maybe it goes into the interface. Maybe then it's the computer. And like you kind of, and so whether it's, a laptop that's having issues or, a camera or whatever, it's sort of, it almost doesn't matter what the device is, or whether it's your brain. It's like, let's start on one side or the other, and then just start pulling the thread and seeing what we can find from there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like the solutions become a lot more reasonable and approachable. It's less overwhelming, and I think that's what a lot of people. Yes,
I get overwhelmed.
Yes,
it's like, oh God, I'm in the middle of 4-dimensional chess now,
yes,
and I don't know what. And so Jeff just calmly says, "Well, I think we can try this and this and this," and there we are.
Yeah, yeah. And in the professional world, it's like that's I think the only prerequisite for what I do. Everything else can be learned, but it's and some people have it, some people don't. It's just, it's the ability to stop and calm yourself. And, even if you're in the middle of like a massive live stream going out to, tens of thousands of people, it's like the process is still the same. You can't, it has breathe through it. But, there was a concept I kind of wanted to circle back to because it's related to all of this. And it's something that I've anchored a lot of what I'll call the past chapter of my life, the past decade or so, has been there's been a theme of vulnerability to it all. And I think it's directly related to all of these topics because it forces you to be okay with not knowing and not having the answer and not having it all figured out. And step one is just being like, okay, I am in a precarious situation here. I don't have, a trust fund. I don't have all these like savings. I don't have like even a job, like, whether you're moving across the country or you're starting, you're just trying to figure out what your next step is in a career. You have to be okay with not knowing first. And from there, you can then have to be okay with reaching out to somebody who might be able to help you. And you have to be okay being vulnerable enough for them to say no, or that they're too busy, or that, don't bother me. And then you have to be okay with then like telling you what they might do, going back to the advice thing. And then you have to be okay with that maybe not working for you for whatever reason, and not throwing everything out and like, okay, let's troubleshoot what that advice might have been. And maybe it's just because this part of the formula wasn't quite right in my circumstance. And so it just becomes this kind of game I've learned to play with myself, and learning to embrace that that beautiful gray area of life.
Well, it's you're talking about having a changed perspective about it. I remember Barack Obama used to do this, and it's not just a matter of, well, I better start doing that. Something helped you, or you helped yourself, but probably other people helped you to be able to change that mental state, that perception of things, so that you knew that would work, that there was something that would help if you cleared the deck essentially, or if you weren't cowed by someone's somewhat negative opinion of you, or their bad suggestions or whatever it is that happens, that somehow you survive those things and you grow from them as well. It seems like, and I'm talking about how people change. That's why I'm bringing this up, and that just is what it sounded like to me, what you were describing.
Yeah, and maybe there's an element of that where it's sort of learn by watching, learn by doing, learn by, it's sort of a lot of the people that I find inspirational, going back to the cross-generation theme, it's, I haven't met yet. There are certain artists that I find that I really resonate with, like David Gilmour of Pink Floyd, like the way he approaches the creative process. I mean, hope to one day meet the man himself, but like it's
David Gilmour.
He's just so soft-spoken and so just, it seems like such a kind human, and especially in like the rock star world compared to his former bandmates like Roger Waters, who I also have a lot of respect for. But I would much prefer to hang out with David Gilmour than Roger Waters. And so it's like the way, that's just one small example of like the creative process. But, there's a lot of talk about life design these days of like, you look at these very, what I'll call successful people across traditional metrics, like big CEOs or tech people or whatever. And you hear them talk about their daily routine, and it's like, oh, well, I only do emails from, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. And then I do this thing from that, and then I get my blood infusion with this. And like, it's like, well, I'm not going to do the blood infusion part, but like, maybe I can try that, maybe restricting, not keeping my emails open all day, and just like not getting torn out of a task to answer this other thing, because, I come to learn much later in life that one of the reasons my brain is unique is probably like an ADHD-spectrum sort of thing, where it's like, it's a superpower in the sense that I can hyperfocus on things that excite me. It's more of a challenge when I'm trying to exist in the administrative world. And there's something really exciting about the operations of the business world for me. Like, I love entrepreneurship. I love startup culture. I love that stuff because it forces someone to look at how all of these independent pieces come together to form something greater than some of their parts, right? Typically in corporate culture, you're just in the marketing department or the sales or the, the tech world, or, it's hard. If you're on the car assembly line, it was that old way of doing it where you're just tightening the same set of bolts over and over again without getting to see the finished car. And they'd done these studies where the worker satisfaction skyrocketed when they were able to participate in part of the process that was way more, let's say, like, gave them way more of the bigger picture of what they were doing than just the minutia of their task. And so it's been important for me to sort of like play those mind games and learn from people who have been in, who've already gone through the phase that I'm currently in, to identify what are some of these, what I'll call hacks or ways of optimizing life that can work with my specific brain chemistry and the way I see the world and all of these things. And to me, again, there's no class for that. That's the only thing you get is from people who are who have done it themselves, and getting a wide sample of those answers, because shocker, they might not all work for you in that
Right,
moment. And
right.
it could be, again, right advice, wrong time.
Well, another thing I'm thinking as I'm listening to you is you seem sort of excited about what the future holds. And I don't mean just you personally, but how the world, I mean, I know there's certain things you're not excited about, that, crises and stuff, political crises and stuff. But I mean, the way the direction the world is going with high tech. Are you afraid of AI? Are you afraid of, are there quagmires along the road that you think are going to doom us? Or do you think that human beings will survive this current situation?
Yeah. This is a very large topic that I spend way too much time thinking about, especially in my world, just
See, I kind of know you a little bit.
you
And I know you
a
thought
little
about that
bit.
stuff.
I will answer your question directly first. Just say I am excited and I am optimistic with a lot of stuff. I think there are inevitably going to be some serious growing pains, and that, not everybody is going to wind up on the right side of all of it, because I think it requires a certain mindset to embrace the tools you have available to you and take the initiative to learn them, and then have the creative juice to implement them in your life. And that's a rare combination of skills. Like it doesn't,
It's a gutsy thing.
There's vulnerability involved with it. And yeah, I struggle to put words to this succinctly, because it's, obviously, like, everybody's talking about it. And every week there's a new AI model that's, just going to change the world, and it's going to be the end of all these jobs. And, like the invention of the automobile replaced the horse and carriage and the people that drove that. And then, but like people today, my generation below, like not everybody even owns a car. It's like, let alone a horse. And it's like, then it became ripe for all these other industries, the service industries with like Uber and Lyft and all that. And so, whenever there's a death of one industry, you can be optimistic and hope that it will open up a brand new one that hadn't existed before, that will be even better than the previous situation. And, what I worry that when the robots take over, if they take over, that people will take that free time that they have. And let me start with the positive. If the robots take over and, everybody has all of their basic needs met, and, maybe this is accomplished through like a, universal basic income sort of thing, or, the free energy. So like all of these topics that get thrown around, the best case scenario is that people then take all of that free time and put it into something that excites them and lets them grow. And everybody has their own unique interests. Everybody's the Michael Jordan of something that, we have no idea even exists yet. And I would love that. But I don't think that's how it would go for most people, because I've met enough people, at this point of my life, people who are much younger, much older. And I kind of, when I talk to them about some of these ideas, it almost doesn't compute. Like, if they didn't have to go to work, they would just drink, or they would just play video games, or they would just, it seems like there's a self-destructive element of humanity that can't be ignored. And that's what concerns me, because, we don't want a society that, just has nothing but time on their hands, but nowhere to put it really that's productive. And so I don't know how that's going to shake out. And I think that'll be uncomfortable, but for the people, and maybe that's just cultural, or maybe there is like sort of a reprogramming element in a positive way, where people can, maybe there's just like this mental health undertone to it all. And people just from a young age, they were never taught how to learn. They were just taught what to, these are the facts. This is the story. This is the whatever. They were never taught how to identify the thing that excites them. And, that's the Rockefeller school system and all that.
Right.
But,
I'm positive that we have not achieved our full mental abilities yet. And so this is why I'm optimistic. I think that when certain things aren't a problem, then you can evolve and you can go on into other things that we haven't even thought of yet.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
There you
start
go.
opening it up.
But since we're on this generational thing, that's what I think sometimes gets in the way of generational authentic relationships. Is the older person, not me, but other older people, they're so alarmed at where things are going, so they want to go back to how things used to be. And if you, like, I always use the example of Next Door, when you read these people that are, yelling at clouds, these old geezers, and it's just like, oh my God. And so that's what I think. I think that younger people have to prepare for their future, and if older people can help them develop and evolve that way, instead of saying, oh man, you're in trouble because it ain't the way it used to be. And we're getting further and further away from an ideal society, rather than we are creating a new society here.
I think that's, you touched on something really important there, because this is the two-way street thing, where the younger generation, and I might have been the last generation who knew life without a smartphone. I
definitely.
I remember dial-up internet. I remember all of this stuff.
Tell everybody how old you are so they cut it off.
I just turned 33.
Okay.
So I was born 93. And I think the best case scenario we can envision is where the younger people who have, we'll call it more of an open mind towards technology, who were born with tools that the older generation didn't know existed. That's great, but without the context that the older people can bring to, the old generations can bring to the conversation, the tools are almost useless.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the people on the older side of the generational scale, nothing's new under the sun, right? It just seems to be, maybe history doesn't repeat, it just rhymes. But there's so many similarities that we just kind of see in these loops of, every few decades or whatever. Excuse me. I think this is where the value of conversations like this start to really shine through, is taking the context and the information that the older generations have to offer and trying to synthesize that with the newer tools we have at our disposal to kind of start identifying the best routes forward for society as a whole.
Yeah.
And
there's things we haven't thought of yet that are going to be very crucial.
I agree. Yeah. And I think that's where I've managed to carve out some lane of success or, unique competencies with my career, is being able to communicate some of these, kind of have my finger on the pulse of technology, because I'm just genuinely interested in it.
Yep. And
being able to then sort of apply that to the projects I'm working on or the field I'm in, and then being able to communicate that to my colleagues who are, a generation or two older than me. And I work for with unique teams and individuals. There are a handful of people that are my age and we have great working relationships, but most of the time I'm working with people, who are somewhere in between you and I. Mm-hmm. And there are, there's a couple of people I work with who are on the younger side of the spectrum, and it requires a different approach. That's been something that I've really been working on in my career, is being able to help manage people and be the good influence and the inspiration that I wish I had in my, traditional, applicable career path, while also being better at opening myself up to the way we do things, quote unquote, and then also having to sort of sort that out. It's like, okay, well, is that because it's the best way, or is it just because it's the way we've been doing things? Mm-hmm. Right. And so this is a really interesting dynamic part of my world that no one, when you get into the production world, no one tells you that that's what your job is. Yeah. They think it's just the pretty pictures, and it's not. And I think, and you can chime in on this, like what makes a good photographer or a videographer to me is someone who can get a performance or a genuine reaction out of somebody. It's not who can tune the settings on their camera the best. Yeah. There is a human interaction component to this world that you can't, it can't be understated enough.
it's hard to define, but you know that it's like it is the crucial thing, even though you can't exactly put your finger on
There's
it.
the capital Q quality
Yeah,
from Zen in the
there
Art.
it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting to wind down here, but I do have another question, and I don't know if it'll be a hard question to answer or not, but you really got a lot out of Dr. Kelly, you said. So I wanted to ask you, do you think Dr. Kelly got anything out of you?
I think I made her laugh.
Say a little more about that.
Yeah, as I think back on it, and it wasn't probably was seeing her for about a year. And a quick anecdote, like I'll never forget this. I had just finished reading Way of the Peaceful Warrior, that first book that had kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things. I go into our next session, I'm like, Doc, it's I can't thank you enough for all you've done to help me, but like I'm good now. I figured it out. She just gave like the laugh, and it was like the oh sweetheart moment. Like, well, I'm so happy to hear that. Why don't you sit down? We'll have our typical session. And obviously she was right. There's like just because you learn about these different concepts doesn't mean it's just you're good, you could just implement it immediately. But as that was sort of towards the end of high school, and then I went away to college, and that was kind of the end of it, like because I just wasn't in Jersey anymore. So but I think I'd like to think that I was one of her more unique clients in terms of it wasn't. I'd like to think that I wasn't just talking about the same stuff she would hear throughout the day all the time.
Well, that just never happened with me. And I bet it never happened with her either. Like it is true that like you sort of look forward to some clients more than others for various reasons. But that doesn't mean that you think that I thought less of the client. It's just like had to gear up, sometimes. Yeah. Or sometimes it was hard to pay attention because they have a droning voice or something. It's sort of like, but each one is a challenge. And I'll have to say, I never kicked anybody out of my office.
That's good. That's great.
Although I was tempted at times.
Yeah.
But I want to share this one funny thing that happened with my first therapist. I was in graduate school. So I was 24 years old. And it was at Denver Mental Health Center. And at the time, that was like one of the early community mental health centers. Like this was just after community mental health centers got involved. The Great Society sort of started that. And Mrs. Richmond was up on the top floor, and it wasn't very warm in her office. She had this space heater, and the space heater kind of would get off. They had a little fan on it, so it started going clunkety, 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 clunkety. And we were just talking away, and it's sort of getting distracting. And she just got up. She was still talking to me, saying something. Just went over and kicked the dang heater. And that is the image I'll always have of Mrs. Richmond, and how I can't even explain how helpful why that was helpful, but man,
the fonts made it work.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need those, like, I think that's a great example of just sort of like the reset, the life grabbing you by the shoulders in a way, just like shaking you, like, no, this is important, pay attention. And sometimes it's a non-obvious or seemingly unimportant thing. And it's like, you're lost in your own thoughts, and you go to cross the street, and all of a sudden a car, because it's like honking by, or like, there's these things that I've caught myself noticing in life where it's like, oh, wow, I'm missing it. And if it wasn't for that moment that just sort of like, slap me or, flick my ear or whatever, it's like, no, here, focus.
Well, I've noticed, like, when you ask about mentors, or people help you, usually you think of that as more of a long-term relationship. But, there are times when somebody just says the right thing. You may not even know them very well, or maybe a stranger, but something, you just have this moment, and somehow you're open to it, and they grab, grasp something. And those are just as important as well.
I think those are spiritual moments. And and some people would frame it in the, religion. I do think that is God, the universe, just like, popping through to be there for you in that moment. And that's sort of what I was trying to touch on earlier. Like that, even if there isn't a long-term relationship you have with somebody, as like a traditional mentorship, they are no less important if they're short or brief. I think my mom had a saying, it's like people are in your life for a reason or a season, and there's these sort of what I'll call like, maybe there are certain, there's something that like it's making me think of that someone was talking about, like gurus, mentors, where it's, there's no one guru for a specific person's life in sort of like the traditional monk sense. Like you have to you have to take the mountaintop excursion, the trip, and then find that guru you need in that moment. And then that guru has to basically, make you wait outside on the steps of the monastery, and then eventually they like invite you in if they think that, this is a relationship that is going to be helpful or not, and so I think whether it was sort of a location, like a geolocational restriction, or it's okay, when I was in Boston, I had these specific people who I still stay in touch with here and there, but and then out here in Colorado, it's a different set of people. And here's one for sort of the music world, Jim Anderson, shout out. But you kind of have to identify who you respect and admire, who seems to have it figured out. And, spoiler alert, no one has it figured out, right. But there are certain people that, that just jump out at you as someone who like, they radiate in a way that you're like, wow, I really enjoy talking to this person. I enjoy or listening to what they have to say. I want to figure out how their brain ticks, and I want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that's a pretty good ending point.
Yeah.
Can you believe it's been 50 minutes that we've been talking?
I could talk to you forever, Howard. We always have fun.
We do. We always have fun.
Well, thanks so much for having me on.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it a lot, Jeff.
Yeah. Can I plug?
Yeah.
So my personal brand is Empathize Studio, Empath Eyes, EMPATHEYES Studio.com. That's probably the best place for people to find me. Empathize Studio on Instagram. If anyone needs help, in the Denver area or anywhere in the world with anything media related or marketing, and just want to talk, reach out. I'd love to chat.
Yeah. If you want to ask me for a reference, I'm glad to do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Appreciate you guys.